The Titans, Giants, and the Jets are all desperate to find a starting quarterback, but is their answer in the draft or in free agency? We discuss more of the biggest offseason storylines around the NFL in today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, but I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This week, we are going through all of the biggest offseason storylines that we're paying attention to when it comes to teams around the NFL and how their decisions might impact fantasy football for the 2025 season. We have already gone through the top 6 storylines, and today, each of our 3 next biggest storylines that we're paying attention to all have to do with teams at the top of the draft that are going to be paying, very close attention to this combine, specifically the quarterbacks, right? Because all 3 of them are in desperate need to find a quarterback. And that's the Jets, who moved on from Aaron Rodgers this offseason, the Giants, who in the middle of last season said goodbye to Daniel Jones, and then the Titans with the number 1 overall pick, with Will Levis not making much of an impact in his second season. So let's start off here with the Titans, because there's lots of rumors that maybe they don't take a quarterback at number 1 overall. Maybe they go with Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State. But their offense was terrible last year, scored the third fewest fantasy points as an offense in the NFL last season. Do you think they could really pass up and not taking a quarterback at number 1 here, Vinny?
Yeah, it just depends how much they like Abdul Carter versus Cam Ward. Do they think Abdul Carter is going to be a game changer that can take over things? But at the same time, you need to get a quarterback here in this system where you've invested a lot around the quarterback. You made some moves on the offensive line in the draft. You've added different weapons, Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard. Just have some weapons there that you need to kind of maximize here. So they have a good baseline. You have an offensive-minded coach in Brian Callahan. So you think they're going to evaluate the quarterbacks very closely here. Now, Will Levis has flashed a little bit, shown some moments, but he hasn't proved to be any much better than Mason Rudolph, right? The difference is very negligible. There's neither nor evidence here that you're going to get anything close to a franchise quarterback from Will Levis, how long you wait. So they have to say, look, Cam Ward, the dual threat, he's special. We saw the impact was with Jane Daniels on the Commanders in a good offensive system. Similar type player, right? Bounced around to multiple programs, ended his career as a Heisman candidate, and was playing really well as a dual threat. So he really matured as we went along through Incarnate Word and Washington State, and then finally at Miami, you really saw him kind of develop and put things together. And we've seen it work out well, right? I mean, Jane Daniels, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, all these guys were in multiple situations here in college, and it paid off. So I think Shedeur Sanders, you start to get a little nervous, right? There are some not favorable reports. He's not going to be working out the combine. And then it's a big drop-off. We don't know who's next. Is it Jaxson Dart? Is it Quinn Ewers? Is it Kyle McCord, who's getting some random buzz late in this process? Is it Jalen Milroe, who started out hot, but then really has tapered off here? So I'm not sure who the second-best quarterback. Maybe it's like a Will Howard or Riley Leonard coming out of nowhere to be pretty good. So I don't know what you're going to get at quarterback if you pass on Cam Ward, where I know there's a lot of good edge rushers beyond Abdul Carter.
Yeah, it sounds crazy to me. The Titans get this opportunity at the number 1 overall and with a desperate need at quarterback, and you don't take it. I mean, even if Abdul Carter does turn into a TJ Watt or a Myles Garrett, I mean, honestly, yes, they're great guys to have, but what have they done for the record books for either of those teams? I guess the Steelers do lose pretty much every time TJ Watt doesn't play, but it's not like it's helping them win any playoff games, right? Either of those 2 guys, they have a combined Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. I think most people would say those are the top 2 edge rushers in the NFL. They've been in the league since 2017, and they have 1 combined playoff win together. So that's just my thing here. I know I'm a fantasy girl, and obviously we're rooting for offense, so we're leaning quarterback, but just in terms of what makes the most sense with trying to rebuild, if you hit on Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or a quarterback, right, that changes your entire franchise and gives you an opportunity to make a deep playoff run in any given season. If you hit on a great edge rusher, you still kind of could always have a losing season. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So let's say they do take a quarterback. Do you think Cam Ward fits in Brian Callahan's offense? Because I do think he fits a little bit more than Shedeur Sanders. I don't have great trust in Callahan's offense. I think he really leaned on Joe Burrow's success and got his head coaching offer. I was shocked they actually didn't move on from Brian Callahan after this year. Do you think either of these two guys fit? And what would that mean for Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard or Tajay Spears? Really the only big weapons there.
I think Ward definitely fits. I mean, Sanders to me is giving me a little nerves, right, on terms of how he would fit anywhere, because he didn't really display a lot of that running ability. I know he can be a good athlete, but I think you really need to look at the dual threats, at least being able to run around. I mean, Bo Nix showed some good mobility as well as Williams. We know Daniels took over and was great in that area, but you need to be able to run around in today's NFL as much as possible to extend plays, to give yourselves a chance to add another element to the offense. And we see Patrick Mahomes, he was the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts, a running quarterback, he was the first true running quarterback to win. And we've seen Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen with their dual threat abilities on the brink of getting to a Super Bowl. So I think that's where the league is trending. These are the guys that can be truly dynamic and special, especially at the big arm like Ward to match the athleticism, right? So again, if I'm the Titans, I would go there. There are some rumblings they go Carter, but to me, just the supply and demand alone in this draft says you should go for the quarterback over the edge rusher.
Yep. And there's another team that, I mean, they're saying, the coaches, the management, they're all saying they're doing everything to find their next quarterback, right? And that's the New York Giants. They have to figure out who it is, because at least the Titans at least have Will Levis to fall back on, right? I mean, the Giants have is Tommy DeVito still even on this roster this offseason? I don't know, but that's like their backup. Or that would be their starter at the moment. So they really need to figure this out. And we, as fantasy players, we want them to figure it out because we want Malik Nabers to hit his full potential. We're going to discuss who Malik Nabers' next quarterback will be in 2025 after we take a quick break. All right, we're continuing to go through our top offseason storylines that we're paying attention to this offseason. And of course, a big one has to be who will be starting at quarterback for the Giants this next upcoming year, because that quarterback is certainly not on their roster, not even close, right? And they have one of the most exciting young wide receivers in the league, in Malik Nabers, who got it done for fantasy and for his team last year with a bad quarterback play. And when we were discussing Malik Nabers last week in our episode about rookie wide receivers, we didn't even discuss, he was injured for a decent chunk of this, right? And kept playing through it. So Malik Nabers, we know, has the potential to be the number one overall player, but who's going to be passing to him? Because this past year, the Giants had the worst fantasy offense in the NFL. I was shocked by that, actually, because what we got out of Malik Nabers, because of what we got out of, a little bit out of Tyrone Tracy. But yeah, they scored the fewest points out of all teams this past season. Do you think Brian Daboll, with one more season likely to prove himself that he's the right guy, will shy away from taking a rookie and lean more towards a veteran this year?
Yeah, that's the question, right? I mean, Cam Ward may not be available. Then you'd have to decide, is Shedeur Sanders the guy, right, at 3? If you get through the Titans at 1 and Browns at 2 and they don't go in that direction, you might end up with Ward, and then things might fall into place for the Giants. But when you look at them, and I think their philosophy is they don't think they're that far away. I think if they did, then Daboll and Mike Kafka would be gone. They would have some wholesale changes. But for a bad team with a defense having a lot of issues, that had one strong thing that takes you far in the NFL is a pass rush. They had some guys who could get to the quarterback. So I think they're confident they can clean up some things defensively, get a corner, get someone to clean up against the run a little bit better. So they do have some key assets. We know that defensively that can help them. So I don't think they think they're that far away when they look at what they have. I think they upgraded their offensive line also this offseason, so to invest there. So that's why you're hearing these Matthew Stafford rumors, right? That it might be a place for him to land where it's a good starting spot. And I think you've already heard that about Sam Darnold going to the Giants in free agency. So that kind of maybe tips us off a little bit. The Giants are willing to go the bridge veteran route because they think they might be able to win some games or at least return to the playoffs. Because keep in mind, they did get to the playoffs with Daboll and Daniel Jones just a couple years ago, and they beat the Vikings. So they actually won a playoff game with Daniel Jones. So I don't think they're that far off that maybe other people might think outside of New York. I think their quarterback situation was just so ugly. So maybe if they think they can just fix that and get someone, hey, Stafford is going to get the ball to Neighbors, open up our entire offense. If we can do that, then the Giants might be leaning in the veteran direction more so than the draft pick.
Yeah, I do think it would be a mistake, right? Because they just saw someone in their division, take a rookie quarterback early and change their franchise over in one offseason. I think if the Commanders went a veteran route, especially if it was like to bring in the Sam Darnold, who did well for the Vikings, but I think if they went that route, they would not have been anywhere close to what they did this year, right? Like Jaden Daniels has changed that franchise for them. So with seeing that, I know it doesn't always happen that way. There's a lot of misses in the top three, especially at that number 3 overall pick. It seems like the curse of the quarterbacks to take there. But I do think Shedeur Sanders should be a high priority for the Giants if Cam Ward is off the board. I do think he could be a good fit with Brian Daboll. And yeah, Brian Daboll might be nervous to hitch his wagon this last attempt at probably getting to prove he should be a head coach in the league, or at least with the Giants, with a rookie. But at the same time, if the Giants aren't willing to kind of start fresh, to find a new young quarterback that could be the future of their franchise for a long time, then they shouldn't have kept Brian Daboll to begin with, right? If it was like you get one more year and that's it, then they shouldn't have, if their goal is to find the quarterback of the future. Maybe like if Stafford is to get traded, I could see this probably being the most likely landing spot. I don't know if they're that close to a Super Bowl where Stafford's going to change them. Sam Darnold, I think, would be a disaster in New York. But Stafford would definitely make Malik Neighbors what? I mean, where would you have to rank him? Top 5 for sure, right?
Yeah, it'd be much like Puka Nacua playing with Stafford, a young special receiver that can put up some big yardage and do damage all over the field, maybe in line for 1,500 yards, right? And a chance for 6 to 10 touchdowns. So you'd be really ecstatic if it was Stafford throwing to him and just translating from Nacua and that connection to this one, or Cooper Kupp even. So when you look at that, I mean, yes, that excites you. Darnold also makes you a little bit excited because even if it could be bad for the Giants in reality, he still made Justin Jefferson a very highly targeted and productive player last year in the system. My only question is they're both like transitioning out of domes, right, or whatever, in comfortable situations. So how would they fare in September when there could be swirling winds already in that division? So I think that's why the mobile quarterback works. I mean, you look at not only Jane Daniels, but Jalen Hurts, and then you have Dak Prescott who can run around and make some plays. I think you kind of have to get with the program and kind of follow your division a little bit. So I personally would go the Ward Sanders route if I could, but I think the Giants are kind of on the fence with both things, right? You make a lot of great points about Daboll staying. Is it to develop a young quarterback, or is it to go prove himself with a veteran quarterback and show that they can win again like they did a couple of years ago? So the Giants are really holding their cards tight on that one, and we'll find out. I think some things will develop here as we learn rumors at the combine and how these quarterback workouts go.
And I will say, like, I do think I'm rooting for Shedeur Sanders the most in this with the Giants. You know, he and his father would love him to be in a big market like New York, right? But he does, I wouldn't be that worried about him as a rookie. Maybe like any issues with his father talking too much and being annoying. But besides that, like, he is an extremely accurate quarterback, right? He can get to the ball to Malik Neighbors. Like, I wouldn't be worried about that. I think he can come in. He's proven every time he's jumped a new level, right, that he can handle it. Doesn't really matter. So I think he'll be able to handle the NFL. I think he can be a really good quarterback in the NFL as well. So that's who I'm rooting for. I definitely am rooting for Shadur Sanders, to make it to New York Giants over the next team we're going to talk about, the New York Jets, because man, would any quarterback want to go to this team with their history of quarterbacks? But they're going to have to come up with a game plan now that Aaron Rodgers is gone and they have yet failed to find their guy for the future. We'll get to the Jets game plan and what we think they'll do right after we take a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in and on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We told you a lot about Luka Doncic's revenge game against the Mavericks. He put up a triple-double. They looked really good in that game. And with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout games, so you can look for a situation like that where a player is motivated, team's motivated. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stand the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. That would have been great with Doncic and the Lakers in that particular matchup. And FanDuel is going to take care of you with their live betting feature. It's going to keep every moment of the game exciting for you. Whether you're backing your team for late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three-pointer, you never feel like you've missed your chance only on FanDuel. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show, and we have to talk about them. Like the Titans and Giants, at least they're have some bit of optimism, right? The Jets, I don't know what you do. Aaron Rodgers' experiment failed miserably over 2 seasons. Robert Saleh is gone. Nathaniel Hackett, all this mess is gone. So what do the Jets do going forward? It's the Aaron Glenn era. Who wants to quarterback this team? Who do we want quarterbacking this team? And it doesn't really matter except for Garrett Wilson at this point.
I know. I mean, for Garrett Wilson, we were excited for him to get Rodgers, right? And it did help him a bit with fantasy. Like he finished as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver this year. So it happened. It just wasn't as consistent and smooth as we wanted it to go. It was a rocky ride all season long. I will say, to give Aaron Rodgers some credit here, it wasn't a disaster of a season. It was just a below average season for him and just not worth the cost for him and not worth the headache that he causes, that it seems like he causes in the locker room, right? And with his coaches and all of that. The Jets ranked 14th in the NFL in fantasy points in 2024. That was up from last. They scored the fewest points in the NFL in 2023 when Rodgers missed the whole season with a torn Achilles. So it did improve a lot in fantasy points. But it was just so inconsistent with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. And now you have Devontae Adams, who, came the second half of last year, had some big games down the stretch, but he's likely going to be out of town with Aaron Rodgers. So what quarterback wants to be here? I don't know if they're going to be able to find a quarterback that's a veteran, right? And then if both Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders are gone in the draft, then I don't know what their plan is going to be for 2025. They might be stuck in a position like the Raiders were this past year, or like the Jets have been for a decade now.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Darnold seems to be out. I can't see that scenario where he returns to play for the Jets, right? I think Matthew Stafford wouldn't want to go there. That's a little bit messy, right, as a situation for him if he wants to keep playing well and winning. I think the Giants have more appeal with that type of move. Then you dig deeper. Kirk Cousins is out there, right? I mean, the Falcons are wishy-washy on whether they want to keep him. I think ultimately they'll let him go because I don't think he wants to just sit there behind Michael Penix Jr. So then you look at the other quarterback options. You got Russell Wilson. We know Aaron Rodgers is out for the Jets. So it's Wilson, Fields in Pittsburgh. potentially crossing over. There's been some rumors. Do they look at Geno Smith and potentially doing things with the Seahawks? But the biggest guy that they've talked about a lot, and I hate this because he's an anti-favorite, that's what I'm going to call him of the podcast, is Derek Carr. Look, Derek Carr, I think the only reason he's been attached to them quite this much is because they have Davante Adams still on their roster. And he seems to be the veteran quarterback that, oh, we can accept Derek Carr being on this team, right? That he's decent, not great, not going to put you over the top, but he's just going to be a guy that's your ultimate bridge quarterback, right? You can plug him in. He's going to be deep. He's in the people in the locker room are somewhat going to like him for the most part. So it's more to stabilize and clean things up. But the rumor that I would watch out for him, and I'm a little bit more excited about, is Jaxson Dart. I want to see if they get more in love with Jaxson Dart, because there's been heavy rumors. This is their guy. I'm not saying it's going to go high the first round, go down there, but second round, I could see them go after Jaxson Dart or making a move up from that second round pick into the late first round for Dart. Because, look, as much as we think Ward and Sanders are the only first round quarterback potentials here, we know that's not always the case. Supply and demand, again, at quarterback says these veteran carousel guys, Stafford, Cousins, Darnold, they're not that exciting. So you have to say, hey, Jaxson Dart, it's not just his name. Like, you will look at his arm, the way he plays, he's tough, he's mentally tough, which is very important to play in New York, right? He's kind of got a personality. So I think he would actually fit okay with the Jets. And then I might start paying attention to the situation a little bit more. So I'm excited. Look, I might be higher in Jaxson Dart than others, but the Jets seem to be as well. And again, just like the Giants, I hope they go the young route, much like the Titans as well. So really all these three teams go young, find that guy. It's going to give us more upside in the end in fantasy.
I will say, if it's Jaxson Dart, that's probably going to make us pretty nervous about Garrett Wilson, right?
Yeah, it will.
Because it's just going to be a complete question mark, and we don't know what's going to happen there. And then you would fully expect Davante Adams, to try to get out to go wherever Rodgers ends up, if he's anywhere. The Derek Carr thing is very interesting because they probably can keep Davante Adams if they do that.
Right.
And I do think Derek Carr can be good for Garrett Wilson. It would be a terrible move for the Jets, but in terms of fantasy football, I don't hate it for their playmakers, right? I do think I do think Garrett Wilson would be plenty good with him. Davante Adams, we've seen, can be good with Derek Carr. So I do think this would be a nice landing spot for Derek Carr too. But then it's like, who in the world are the Saints going to start, right? They kind of put them into this position where they don't have anyone. They don't have money to go sign anyone in free agency. And really, it's Sam Darnold. When that's the top of the free agency class, you're in trouble. And then also they are drafting too low to draft either Sanders or Ward. So I just think they're just switching spots here where the Saints get rid of Derek Carr. Cool. But then you have no one to start. I think the Derek Carr thing is very interesting. And honestly, if they don't get him, and obviously I don't think they're going to get a reunion with Sam Darnold, that wouldn't make any sense. Then they probably do have to go the quarterback route of the second round if they're into Jaxson Dart, like you said, or maybe Quinn Ewers. But I don't see a great suggestion for them to fix this in one off season.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to do that. And we've seen them take shots on guys before. I'm going to go deep a little bit with these names, but Christian Hackenberg, Bryce Petty, these type of dudes that they've tried to sell as potential developmental guys, and they've just flamed out, right, pretty quickly. So you do get nervous if you're a Jets fan, if you're looking second, third round, day 2 type quarterback, or even day 3 project here. So I think Carr is kind of just he's boring, but as we've said, he's going to facilitate. We're not going to go bang the table to say, oh, he's got Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson. Oh, he's suddenly a good fantasy asset. No, he wasn't for more than a couple of games with the Saints, and that was at the time when Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed were healthy early in the season. But we know he's a facilitator of those guys, and sometimes you just want that for fantasy. And Michelle's right. Also, the quarterback, if you pivot to a rookie, there's that little bit of uncertainty, unknown. You kind of settle in once you see it, right? Once you see a Jane Daniels with Terry McLaurin, then okay, we're in business now. But it makes you a little bit nervous if it's not a Daniels type, can't miss type quarterback, right? And we just have to watch this play out. But again, I'm a guy who says it's cheap enough to draft a rookie quarterback. Draft the rookie quarterback. See what you have. Don't waste time time is precious here. Don't waste it on like these bridge quarterbacks that are bridge to nowhere for probably 1 or 2 seasons.
Yeah, I could see them maybe going like Jameis Winston and then a quarterback in the second round,
Yeah,
making them
that could
compete.
happen.
Yeah, that might happen. But that is it for today's episode. We're going to go through 3 more biggest storylines that we're paying attention to on tomorrow's episode. The combine starts tomorrow. We're going to have lots of things happening. That free agency is like less than 2 weeks away. Fun times in the NFL offseason. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. But for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.